Welcome to Seacoast Stories, a podcast about the people, businesses, and newsmakers that make the Seacoast an American hidden gem. I'm Trey Farkas, and on today's episode, my conversation with Paige Lindsey, a popular Seacoast artist who hosts workshops at Seacoast businesses, paints at live events, makes a podcast, and creates content for her nearly 18,000 Instagram followers. I met Paige during the Exeter Fall Art Tour in October, a day when all the local studios opened their doors to the general public. I found Paige's tucked away studio, a shed next to her house. And before I could even take a sip of my mulled wine, Paige had already wrapped me in one of the best hugs of my life. And over the ensuing 30 minutes, I learned that not only is Paige's art stunning, but she is unlike anyone I've ever met before. Her energy is infectious, sense of style is unmatched, and best of all, she is not afraid to be her true self. If you know Paige, you'd assume she's always been this carefree, this forthcoming, and this unapologetically herself. But as it often plays out on this show, the road to get to this point was not as easy as she makes it seem. On today's episode, Paige will discuss the roller coaster ride that's taken her here, a ride that's included cross-country moves, failing school, family trauma, and, unfortunately, a miscarriage that rocked her world. If that last part may trigger any negative emotions for you, I suggest you skip that section. On a positive note, we'll also talk about how to put yourself out there more and how she balances motherhood with her chaotic career. Yes, she did give birth to a baby boy in 2023. As you know, Valentine's Day is right around the corner, so to begin today's episode, we tell the very romantic story of how Paige met her husband.
The truth, like the real story.
Yeah.
It's a good story. Our love story, it's so romantic. So my husband, Sam, and I, we met at school. We both attended the University of New Hampshire. We were both recently just out of longish term relationships. Like I had a college boyfriend, he had a girlfriend from high school, and it was senior year. We both were single. We had the same friend group. I saw him and I was like, oh, he's like cute. I kind of want to have sex with that guy. And that was just my goal. I was like, I'm just going to have a one-night stand with this dude. Seems nice. We hang out with the same guys. And that's how it happened. I was like, okay, this is just a one-time thing. I really don't see this going anywhere because I'm single. It's senior year and I just want to have fun. And he was like, yeah, same. I'm single. Just want to have fun. And then we just kept hanging out. And here we are, fast forward like over a decade, and we have a baby and a house together. So
oh my gosh,
it's just
wow.
it was really just physical from the very beginning. And then I realized, I was like, wow, this guy's actually kind of great. And
wow.
Then I remember he asked me to be his girlfriend right before we graduated. And I was like, all right, sure. But like, it's not going to work out. Like you have your life all planned out. You're moving to Boston. And I, graduated with an art degree and I was going to Italy to paint for the summer. And that was that. So I was like, all right, we can try, but it's going to eventually end. And he was like, all right, well, I mean, we can just see what happens. And
wow.
It worked out.
Look at you now. Okay, so did you come on to him?
Yes,
Did you make
1,000%.
Okay, I love to hear this because I know a lot of women are usually hesitant to make the first move. They think it's got to be a guy thing. So what was your move?
So going back to my Jersey roots, I am kind of a forward person. And if I want something, I kind of go after it. And so I remember we were just hanging out and it was like, I don't know, Scorp's bar in Durham, New Hampshire, if anyone Seacoast Stories, you get UNH, Scorp's, Libby's. It was like a night after Scorp's. He came back to my place. We were chatting, having fun and just like getting to know one another. We were drunk. So like just having, who knows what the conversation was. But I remember he was like, all right, well, I'm going to go home. I was like, well, or you can stay over. And he's like, what? I'm like, yeah, do you want to stay over? And yeah, that was that. And I was like, all right, that was my fun. Yeah, so I made the first move.
I respect that. Okay, so you're at UNH.
Yeah.
What were you studying at that time and how did you envision your career would pan out from then?
Yeah. So at the time, my goal was to graduate with a BFA, a Bachelor in Fine Arts, and that was on the path I was on. And I was minoring in ballet. So very artsy fartsy. And a lot of people were like, what the hell are you going to do with both of those degrees? But, my dream was to do something creative and artsy, but like I didn't know what that meant or what that was. I feel like at that time, I graduated in 2013. You could go get your MFA, so go to grad school. You could go move to a city and work at a gallery, or you can do nothing with your art degree and have a completely different job and try to make it as an artist on the side. So I didn't really have a plan. Like most artists and art majors, they don't really have a plan. And I'm generalizing, but I was just like, I know there's something out there for me. I just don't know what it is right now.
Now, oftentimes in life, things don't always go according to plan.
Mm-hmm.
So when you were at UNH pursuing your degree, things didn't necessarily go according to plan, right?
No, they didn't. They kind of fell apart for a hot second. So so the goal was to get my BFA because I was told in school, like if I got my bachelor's of fine arts, it would make you successful. It's what you need to be a successful artist. And so I ended up my senior year, there was this class, the critique class, which was like the one class you really needed to pass in order to get your BFA. And like what that class entailed was basically you get set up in a studio, an art studio on campus, and you have these critiques where all the professors from the art department come and they like view your work and they give you feedback. Some of those critiques could be super intense, but for me as a very emotional type of person, very sensitive, they were extremely hard for me. So I would be crying because I just, having these conversations with professors that were essentially supposed to allow the student to kind of like present their work in a way and like have the professors give feedback that will help them make changes, do better with their work, progress. And for me, it just was very challenging. And so very emotional. And I ended up failing that critique class, the one class I needed to get my BFA. And we can go into the why behind why I failed it because there's more to that. And I just was devastated. So I ended up, graduating with a Bachelor of Art degree in painting and a minor in ballet. So I didn't get the BFA. That would allow me to open up all these doors for other things in my life.
You brought it up. What was going on in your life at that moment that was kind of partly to blame for why you failed that class?
During that time, my mom was diagnosed with a very aggressive type of breast cancer. So she got her diagnosis. And the same day, my dad was checked into an inpatient program for his depression. So like my family dynamic and situation was kind of falling apart. I have a younger sister who's 10 years younger than I am. And at that time, she was 11, 12 at home. And I was in New Hampshire failing this degree that was supposed to open all these doors for me. And so I wasn't able to express to my professors, my teachers, what was actually going on. I didn't know how to ask for help. And so I think what I did instead was I kind of shut down. I stopped putting work and effort into my painting. I stopped like showing up for the classes. I kind of leaned into the partying aspect of college because I just didn't know how to kind of express what was going on at home.
Did you feel, and I'm so sorry that happened, especially on the same day.
Yeah,
oh my gosh,
it was
I can't
brutal.
imagine that. Did you feel any calls to go back home and to put school on pause? Did you feel guilty still pursuing your thing while there was so much going on at home?
Yeah, I felt super guilty. I felt like a failure for not being able to kind of do what I wanted to do, but also feeling like, well, what the hell am I going to do? Like, what am I going to do with this degree? Like, should I pivot and do something different? Should I quit school altogether? Like, I just had all these things kind of swirling around my head, feeling really like disjointed and like kind of crazy. And my mom, like, she's just like our saving grace with our family. She was like, keep doing what you're doing. This is what you're meant to do. Don't think about leaving school. Like, we'll figure it out. And that's what I did. And so I remember I applied to the UNH painting program, which was a summer program. It was 6 weeks. And I ended up getting a scholarship to go and do this program. I was like, Mom, like I got in. I don't know if I'm supposed to do this. Like, you guys need me at home. I feel like I should come home. And she was like, no, do this. Like, you got in, you deserve to go. And so that's what I did. And I think also it was a way to kind of show the professors that kind of stripped that degree from me. Like, hey, like I'm still important and still valid and allowed to take up space in this art community. And so that was a really pivotal moment for me. That's where I met Amy, who was on your podcast. Shout out Amy. Shout out. And a lot of like amazing people that were so supportive and kind. And just, I opened up to them about what was happening at home. And that trip in itself gave me the confidence to kind of move forward with whatever lied ahead in the future for me.
And your mom turned out to be okay.
Yeah, my mom is doing well. She is a powerhouse. She's had 2 different types of cancers.
Wow.
And she's doing great. She's in remission for both and doing really well. And my dad, it took a very, very long time, like years and years and years of medication and help and therapy, but he is doing well too. So I just feel like those living with individuals with mental illness, it's very different than when you yourself are struggling with mental illness. Like I can just speak on my behalf and my experience. Like I have my own anxieties and other things going on, but with depression, it's just, especially with a parent that is the breadwinner, it's just like, it's extremely tough. Like shit was scary. And I've learned so much from it. I think I'm such a positive light and give a lot, big energy because of hard things that I experienced during that time.
Well, I am so glad to hear that. And we'll talk about your mental health later on, but I do want to stay on your life and career trajectory. So I know from a previous conversation that you go to Italy and you prove to yourself that you do have more worth than what your art teachers were telling you. So you graduate with an art degree, just not the one you wanted. You and your new boyfriend, Sam, moved to Boston together. You soon land an unpaid internship at an art magazine and a part-time job at a paint and sip bar called The Paint Bar. That was a lot. Life was moving very fast for you then. How did you feel about your long-term career prospects in the art field at that point?
Yeah, I was kind of all over the place. So I will say, after the painting course in Italy, which was a dream, I kind of put a pause on my creativity and my painting. So working for the art magazine was really great. I feel like that kind of fueled my creative spark and fire. But as far as me creating, that was put on pause on the back burner for just a little bit. Also a little traumatized from failing the BFA and my experience with art school in general. I ended up getting a part-time job at a fashion startup called Fashion Projects, which was an e-commerce company. LOL fashion startup in Boston. I don't think Boston is the most fashion forward place, but it was great. It was awesome. Worked there, eventually got more hours. That became more full-time, still working part-time at the paint bar. The fashion project startup e-commerce company eventually was dunzo, got kind of blown up a little bit, and that ended. And then I kind of shifted and just put all my eggs into the paint bar. And that was my full-time gig for a very long time. And that is where I learned the ins and outs of running a business, what it looked like to work for really strong, independent women. It was owned by mother-daughter, Jackie and Jill. And they're the ones that helped me gain the confidence to show up for myself more and more creatively. So working at the paint bar full time, that's when I started to slowly reintroduce painting into my life again.
Now, why had you taken the pause from it if that was ultimately what you wanted to be doing?
I think I was just so crushed, honestly. And that was just emotionally. Also, what was going on with my family, I was just emotionally drained and just put all of that on pause. I just think mentally I was very focused on making money, my job, hanging out with my friends and Sam. I think that was just my focus. I wasn't really thinking about what was fueling my creative fire. And I feel like a year plus, maybe almost 2 years into working, where I was I'm missing something. And that thing that was missing was the painting, the creating.
Were you doing any just for yourself, not for any public display? Just anything on the side, just in the comfort of your own home?
Not until maybe a year and a half, 2 years after graduating. Yeah.
That is so hard to imagine.
I know.
Paige not making stuff.
But it's not an uncommon story. I just feel I've heard this so many times before, where people who go to school for art or have an intense art program, they kind of pause after just because they're emotionally drained. They're just tired, a little burnt out. And I think that's just what it was, on top of the fact that I was dealing with a lot of stuff at home too.
So you're in Boston, you're working at the paint bar for 2 women who instilled a lot of lessons in you.
Mm-hmm.
At any point in this part of your story, are you thinking, I kind of want to do my own thing. I want to be my own artistic brand and create stuff again? Well,
totally. Because I had these 2 women in my life now that were just, this was their business and their everything. And they were just so inspiring. And so I was wow, it'd be so cool to do something like this. I didn't necessarily want to have a paint and sip company. I was that'd be cool if I could create something that was all my own. And then, Instagram started to really ramp up in those days. And I started seeing other artists show their work online and show up in ways that I've never seen before. And I was like, wow, that's really cool. And I was super inspired and was like, okay, like, I think I'm really good at teaching people how to paint because that's just what we did at the paint bar. I've had this skill now. I went from being super shy and like hating public speaking to just loving public speaking and commanding a room and teaching people how to do a specific thing. So it was at the time when I slowly started reintroducing painting into my life, I was doing like little watercolors, just because they're easy to transport and they were just like fun. And so I was like, oh, it'd be cool if I could do something with watercolors in a workshop setting. And with the encouragement and support from Jackie and Jill and other artists in the Boston area, I started signing up for markets like SOA Market, which was really big and still is very big and huge. And I did a market here and there. And then I started doing a workshop here and there at like local shops. And slowly, like very gradually, very slowly, it started to like ramp up and become this thing that I was like, there's something here. And at the same time, still working full time for the paint bar.
And so in that time, were you rediscovering that itch that first got you into this all in the first place?
Yeah, because what I love so much about working for the paint bar and just teaching people how to discover their creativity was like, people come up to me like, your energy is just really like, thank you for your energy.
Can confirm. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like the word that keeps popping up over and over again for me is energy, and like how I welcome people in and make them feel supported and nurtured, because for so many years of my life, I did not feel that. I desperately wanted to like fit in and feel supported and nurtured. And I never got that. So I feel like, okay, if I'm going to create something, or just do something, like I want people to feel like they're allowed to take up creative space or allowed to do the thing that they maybe never tried before, or maybe they're nervous doing because it's outside their comfort zone. So yeah, just starting to think about that. I was like, how do I pull that into whatever it is I'm going to create for myself?
Why did you not feel supported and nurtured coming up?
Yeah, I mean, well, I think I grew up during a time in the early 2000s, very like mean girl culture. Like that was very much a thing. Like high school was tough for me. I was artsy. I did ballet, played the violin. Like
so you were one of the cool girls.
Well, now, but I was not one of the cool girls, which people I think are shocked when I say that, but I'm not, because people are like, oh, you're so cool. I'm like, L fucking L. Like I just was never cool. And I wanted desperately to be cool. So I never felt like I fit in high school, and going into college, I always felt like I didn't fit in there either, because if you look at me, I wear a lot of colors. I like pink. I like sparkles and glitter. I'm just like a big ball of energy, and like I'm very feminine. And I think my male professors, who were a little cranky and crotchety, maybe a little insecure about their own artistic path and what's happening, I'm projecting, like I don't know, but I just feel like they didn't know what to do with me, or like where to place me. Because at that time in art school, I feel like we were all taught like, well, in order to be successful, like you need to be damaged and tortured as an artist and like have these really big, deep feels that will then relay onto your paintings, which like, yeah, but you're also 18, 19, 20, 21, like you haven't really lived that much life yet. And like at that time I was experiencing something very deep and intense, but I didn't know how to process it. So now fast forward 10 plus years, I'm processing like what I went through, like with my dad and like my mom through my paintings now, because I am mature enough to like process it. And like the key thing for me was like, I was starting to believe in myself, which like I didn't really like who I was. I was trying to be all these different types of people. And then like, I feel like 27, 28 is when I woke the fuck up and was like, hey, who I am is pretty cool. And like, I can do really great things. And I would tell myself that. And I started to believe it, believe that. Also, at that time where I was mentally, I was like starting to really just embrace who I was and like who I was as a person, which helped.
Coming up, Paige explains why she and Sam moved to Seattle, the heart-wrenching story of why they then came back to the Seacoast, and she gives advice to anyone who wants to create on social media. But first, I want to give you a behind-the-scenes look into how Seacoast Stories is made. It's only one episode per week, but there is so much that goes in to making each show. First, there's booking the guest via email or DM. Then there's the pre-interview, where we exchange basic info. Then the actual 90-minute in-person recording, followed by an entire production week involving audio mixing, trimming for clarity, sound design, writing the show notes, and the weekly Sunday night sprint to publish the episode on Monday. Then, once the episode is out, there's the never-ending battle of telling you about it. So much time, energy, attention, and intention goes into every episode. And if you enjoy the podcast, we ask that you do just one favor for us. Tell one friend about the show. Send them a text, share an episode on Instagram, or better yet, mention it the next time you're grabbing a drink at the Wilder. I'll be there Wednesday night, by the way, so please come and say hi. I would love to hear your story. Thank you so much in advance for doing that and for being here today. I really appreciate it. Now back to today's story. You and Sam would then move to Seattle. Mm-hmm. Why did you do that?
Yeah. So Sam and I, like I said, we were in Boston for almost 10 years. And personally, I think Boston has a shelf life of like 5 to 7.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit shorter. I love Boston. I love it so much. But growing up close to New York City, we were feeling like, okay, we've checked all the boxes Boston has offered. So COVID happened and we can either re-sign our lease, move back home with our parents. We were kind of meh about both those options. And then we just decided, we had a few friends out in the Pacific Northwest, specifically in Seattle. We were just like, all right, fuck it. Let's just like move to Seattle. And so that's what we did. So we packed up our things. We drove cross country, found this apartment on Craigslist. Like again, another situation that was like risky and kind of like, what are we doing? Like, what's going on? We were like newly engaged. We were planning a wedding. And we were like, well, all right, let's just go. Again, like listening to myself say that, I'm like, what? It's just, I don't know. It's one of those things where it's like, I don't know when I'm going to be experiencing a different part of the country. Like, you know, you've moved and experienced different places. It's like the idea of just putting yourself outside of your comfort zone, meeting new people, experiencing new things. And that's just what we wanted to do. So we did it.
Yeah. And this was also keeping in mind the perspective of the times. The world is ending.
The world is ending. So we might as well do something different and crazy. And
exactly. Everyone was in the reflective mode of, wow, I've really been living completely unaligned. There's so many dreams that I've never pursued. When am I going to do that? And that's why the quitting rates were so high in 2020 and 21. And you had people starting to move to different places like you did. So.
Yeah, so that's what we did. And we were in Seattle for almost 3 years. We loved it out there.
Very cool. Fun fact, I was born there.
What?
Yeah.
Where?
Yeah. Federal Way.
Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Shout out.
Shout out.
So when you're in Seattle, it's deep COVID. What were you doing for your career then? Because so much of your business was based back in Boston at the markets and such.
Yeah, it's tough because during the time we were moving, I started to build connections. I was like really making these great art friendships and these different collaborations with different businesses for workshops. And so I feel like I was starting to put down roots with my business, which was very still much like part-time. And so I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to like uproot and move and try to do the same thing that I started doing in Boston and Seattle. And so that's what I did. But the thing about that is like no one really wanted to meet in person because, you know, hashtag COVID. So I would just use my excuse as like my business. Hey, like I'm an artist. Like I'd love to grab coffee or just like hop on a call. And, you know, people were just like, oh, the Seattle Freeze. Like you're never going to make any friends. Like, have you heard of the Seattle Freeze?
Is that?
Oh, okay. So there's this thing. It's called the Seattle Freeze where apparently if you move to Seattle, you won't make any friends because people who are born in Seattle or just people in Seattle in general are just very passive aggressive and just don't really want to make new friends. And so people were telling me this. Also, I love when people who've never lived in a place are telling you, you know, things of what to expect in the place that you're going. I'm like, okay, but you've never lived there. So Seattle has a lot of transplants, which is great. And so I became really close and friendly with different transplants from like all over the West Coast and Midwest, just literally cold emails, DMing people. Like I was just reaching out. Like I would message 20 people a day to be like, hey, this is who I am. I think we'd be a really great connection. Like, blah, 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 blah. I just go, and like, you know, some people would ignore me.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. I was like just putting myself out there.
And was your goal here to establish work relationships and get clients or opportunities, or was it just to make friends and to hang out with people? What were you going for?
Yeah, it was mostly first work and client relationships and just building my business in Seattle, but also friends. Cause like I had no friends. We had some friends, but they were Sam's friends, but I didn't have any of my friends there. And so I was like, okay, I can do this. Like, yeah, I'm going to get a bunch of no's, but I will get definitely a few yeses. And I did. And like, shout out to the people that responded and were so kind and like connected with me. And I, to this day, have really great relationships out in the Pacific Northwest.
Oh, I love that, Paige. That is such a good lesson because it's so hard to make new friends these days.
Especially as an adult. Yeah.
Especially as an adult. Especially as a married adult or taken adult.
Yeah.
Just the willingness to just put yourself out there and just say, hey, I'm new here. You don't know who I am, but I can do X, Y, and Z. I think that's a really good lesson for anyone who moves somewhere new and doesn't know anyone or is somewhere that they've been a while and just wants to put themselves out there more. So kudos to you.
Thank you. And it's easier said than done. Like I thrive on connecting with people. And for those who are a little more introverted, it can be really scary and hard. And also it's comfortable. Like you have your set group of friends to like not put yourself out there. But for me, I mean, I craved that connection, that energy, which I didn't have when we moved to Seattle. And so I was like, the only way I'm going to get that is if I put myself out there. And now I've moved back across the country and I've done this now 3 times really well. And so, I mean, it's possible. I think anyone who's like, I don't know if I should do that thing or move there because I won't make any friends. Like, yes, you can. It's just going to take a little bit of work, a lot of work actually, but you'll get there.
Okay. So you and Sam would spend 3 years in Seattle and then you moved back across the country. Why did you two make that choice?
So we didn't really want to move back across the country. In 2021, I got pregnant unexpectedly and I had a miscarriage. And so I think that situation kind of flipped everything on its head. Like we were very much like experiences, different places, all these things that we were very passionate about doing when we moved to the Pacific Northwest kind of flew out the window when we figured out that I was pregnant. And so miscarriage is it's an interesting and tricky thing because it's so unique and different, case by case, something that's not talked about too. But we were like, okay, maybe we are more ready to start a family than we thought. Because at that time we were like, no, we'll still have, live our life here in Seattle. Like we'll move back eventually, but we just weren't thinking about doing that anytime soon until I got pregnant. And so then once we made the decision, we're like, okay, let's start looking back on the East Coast to be closer to family. Because when I got pregnant, we were like, all of our family is so far away. Like our support that would be there for us is so far away. And then, I don't know how this happened. My best friend was our real estate agent. We found a house in Seacoast, New Hampshire, Exeter specifically. And so we said yes to this house, sight unseen, and we moved back to New England, which is insane.
Well, we are very glad to have you back here.
Yeah.
You said that miscarriages are something that we don't really talk about much.
No, we don't.
If you don't mind, I would like to talk about it a little because I don't know much about it. I don't know statistically, but I know anecdotally, this is something that happens a lot more often than we think. It's not something that people usually want to talk about or are super open about. So just take me into that. When did you find out you were pregnant? And how much time was there in between you finding out that you had miscarried?
You're right. It's not talked about. And I think I just want to say too, also, it's like a very sensitive subject too, triggering for some, but it's one of those things where my mom and people in my life had miscarriages, but I didn't know that until I shared that I was experiencing this thing, this really hard, traumatic thing. And so, I don't know. It's funny. I was going to look up statistics and all that stuff. I was like, whatever. I'll just like kind of speak from the heart. But I got pregnant November 2021. It was early. It was first trimester, which is like the time when sometimes your doctors will be like, depending on what you're comfortable with, you may want to keep this information to yourself or share with those close to you, because during the first trimester is when you're most likely to miscarry. And I miscarried around like 10 weeks, 11 weeks. So it was earlier on. It was tough because I wasn't mentally prepared to be a mom or have a baby. And so I was like very like, oh my God, I don't know if I can do this. I like my business was very much top priority. Like that was my baby. I started to build it and really like put fuel on that fire. And I'm like kind of getting used to the fact and kind of familiar with like, okay, this is like our reality. Like, what are we going to do? And then that kind of gets stripped away when you have a miscarriage. Like the emotional roller coaster was just so wild and insane. And there's like this grieving process. And for me, it was, still relatively early on. Like I know women who carry further along and experience child loss later in their pregnancy, which is like a completely different type of grief, I'm sure. And it's just one of those things where I started talking about it pretty soon after I was a little more emotionally healed. Just because I was like, you know what, everything that I'm feeling right now, I know others are feeling too. And like, I needed the support and comfort and love, not only from my family, but from other really inspiring, supportive women in my corner. And so that's what I started to do. I started to share just a little bit by bit of my own experience. And it was really eye-opening and really comforting because other people opened up too and helped them maneuver and kind of feel more supported because you just feel very, very alone.
That's amazing that you did that.
Mm-hmm.
When you were delivered the news about the miscarriage, what was your reaction?
Well, the thing about that time, it was like during the holiday season. So it's one of my busiest times. So I had all these events and workshops. I remember I like taught the biggest workshop of my life. It was like 50 plus people at this winery and I was currently miscarrying. So like, I don't know. I just like, I think for me, I was just focused on like, okay, these are the things I committed to. I need to just get through them. And then once the holidays hit, I was like a wreck. I just like kind of disappeared for a little bit. I was just on the couch, really sad, crying, and then just processed a lot of what was happening with like how I felt, our decision to move back to the East Coast. It's hard to explain because it's just so heavy. It's hard to put into words. But it's just was one of the most challenging moments in my life.
And forgive me for being naive. Do you know why you miscarried? Is that something that happens because it's completely beyond the woman's control, or is it because of something that is in your control?
No, it wasn't in my control. I just think it was early on. Also, sometimes when you get pregnant for the first time, your body will react and kind of like fight the embryo. Like it's kind of like a disease, especially. So, I mean, there's all these different things of what could lead to miscarriage, like your age, stress, blah, blah, blah. This was, I think, out of my control. And I think because I was pregnant for the first time, I think my body was just reacting to it. And then, I got pregnant again with Bodhi and everything. Yeah, I mean, it's different for everyone. It's case by case. I really feel for all my friends and women out there who are struggling to get pregnant, going through IVF, experiencing loss, miscarriage. Like there's so many, I kind of have a problem with the whole social media and how motherhood is glamorized. Oh, getting pregnant is so easy, breezy. And it's not. I think people assume, oh, it's so easy to get pregnant, but it's really it's unique to every individual.
Well, thank you so much for talking about that.
My pleasure.
And for being open about it. It's very important. So you're dealing with a lot.
Yeah.
You guys made the decision when you thought you were going to have a baby. Okay, we're moving back to New England. We want to be closer to family. And you still go through with that even if you don't have the child. And so you decide on Exeter.
We do.
Why did you want to come back to the Seacoast where you had been all those years ago when you attended UNH?
Yeah, so I think Sam and I were thinking about places to settle. And I put it in quotes because I just don't know. Like settling to us is very scary. We're like, well, what if we want to move someplace else? Like, I don't know. So we were thinking about different locations, New Jersey, Sam's from Vermont, and we're both like, I don't know. We settled on Seacoast, New Hampshire because I love the ocean. Nature was very important for Sam. City, I'm such a city girl. I needed access to the city. And for us, like Exeter, there's a train station. It goes right to Boston. I could hop on the train to New York, like go to Boston, then to New York if I wanted to. And fun fact, Exeter, my dad was a professor at Phillips Exeter many, many moons ago. And my mom was getting her master's degree at UNH while pregnant with me. So that's like the little connection to Exeter. That's how I discovered it because of my parents. And so I remember we were driving through all these different coastal towns in the Seacoast and just like in New England in general. And it was like a shitty March day, like gross. And Sam and I were like, wow, this place is so cute. I think we could really live here and like start a family here. But we were like, the housing market, it's like batshit crazy. Like, I don't know. Yeah, and I don't know. All of a sudden it kind of fell into our laps. And I remember Sam was like, should we like put in an offer in this house? Like, I don't know if we're going to get it. I was like, let's just try. And the offer went through and we're like, okay, this is it, I guess. We're gonna see how it goes.
Wow.
And I'm so glad. And also like we have so many roots here, like so many good connections, friendships from school, really great art community here. Just people are so kind and warm. It's different. Like I still feel a little like out of place a little bit. I feel like sometimes like I don't know if they know what to do with me, but that's okay. That's fine.
Yeah.
It's totally fine. I add a little flair. It's great.
We love it. Yes, you add some much needed personality to Exeter. Okay, so in all of this time, 2020, 21 is really when you start building your personal brand. Paige Lindsey Design now has approaching 15,000 Instagram followers, which is pretty crazy.
Thank you.
When does that brand building really start?
Let's see. Definitely on like when we moved to Seattle, that's when it really started to ramp up. Because I should mention, just to backtrack a little bit, like I was working at the paint bar and I started working at this like yoga studio, and like 2020 I got laid off. My hours were cut from the paint bar. And so that's when I was like, okay, I'm going to just go all in with my business. Like all my time and energy. I have the time to just really think about what that looks like for me. And so I think that's when it really started to take shape and form. I don't think it was all planned out. As far as the branding, I was just like, okay, this is what I want to do. I want to do my own artwork. I want to be in the wedding industry. I want to put on workshops, and I would like to have conversations with other artists and maybe start a podcast. So I just started like planting seeds. So I think like 2021, like end of 2020, 2021.
Okay. So take me into the early days of what we now know today.
Yeah.
At this point, you were just really starting to get comfortable with yourself and putting yourself out there, right? Mm-hmm. But was it difficult to start creating on social media and to put stuff out there? Some stuff, I personally know like so much stuff I put out, especially from just a couple years ago. I'm like, God, that was so cringe. Why was I doing that? Why did I think that was entertaining? I can't believe I put myself out there in that way.
Yeah.
Did your early days resemble that at all? Where it's like, I don't know what I'm doing at all.
1,000%. I think what some people get so caught up in is like making sure everything is so perfect, when I just think it's all like in the early days, like I was using a million filters. Like there was like weird, like the Instagram filters, there was all these like animal like ears, like the bunny ears. Remember like the animal faces?
Yeah.
Like I was using all of those. Like, oh, these are cute. Like all these little stickers on my face. Like it was so silly, but I was trying different things and trying to get more comfortable with just like talking to my phone. But I do think as an only child of 10 years, like that's what I would do when I would try to entertain myself. Like I would literally like do what I do now on Instagram, like in front of a mirror. So I feel like I was prepped a little bit, But yeah, there's so much shit on there that I'm like, oh God, cringe. Like, why would I ever say that or look like that? But I just feel like it's practice, and it's really helped me feel extra comfortable in front of just, strangers. And like when I meet someone for the first time, like it's helped. And I think for anyone out there that's like, I'm just so bad at Instagram, I think you have to think about, well, how are you going to show up in a way that you feel comfortable? Like you don't have to show your face all the time. You can write poetry. You can do different types of content creation that works for you. Because so many people will be like, well, you're crushing it. How do I do what you do? I'm like, you don't want to do what I do. You want to do what works for you. What works for me is like doing these crazy dance moves and showing up as myself. Like that's just me. I'm not trying to like put on this act. Like I try my very best to be my like true self, which comes out in such silly ways sometimes, but that's just me. And so I think anyone out there that's like, how do I even get started? Just start little by little. Who cares? Who cares?
What advice would you give to someone who doesn't feel as comfortable being their true selves? How would you advise them to fully lean into who they are and to get over the insecure part of it?
Well, the way I look at it, it's like people can tell that you're being fake from a mile away. Because I used to do that. I used to try to be like all these other people that I thought were crushing it. Or like, I take myself back to like the popular girls at school. I'm like, oh, if I can only look like them or talk like them, then I'll be accepted. But it's like, that never was the case because I wasn't being who I was. So I think people need to, or what they should do, at least what I did, maybe this will help, maybe it won't, is I started looking towards different artists and creative entrepreneurs online and seeing what they are doing. And I was like, oh, I really like what they're doing and how they're showing up. How can I be inspired by what they're doing and make it my own? And so for anyone out there, I think advice, like who's kind of a little bit more shy, like it's okay to be shy. There's ways that you can show up and still be your shy self, but that makes you more comfortable. Like I just don't think everyone needs to go chatting to a screen 24/7. They can show up in ways that are more quiet and kind of like lean into like who they are.
I watched one of your videos that I really liked because I relate to it as well, where it's you staring at one of your pieces of art and just being like, I hate everything about this.
Oh my God, that was, and that's, okay, that was a wild one because I was pregnant and I was like, this is a piece of shit painting. Like, I hate it. Does anyone else feel this way?
But you stared at it and you're like, this stinks. I know I'm capable of better and I'm going to workshop it and do it again better and better and then come back with something that I truly am proud of. And that's something as creatives, we are our own worst critics. I don't know about you, Paige,
1,000%.
but every time still don't think I've done a good podcast yet. I beat myself up after every podcast. I should have asked this. I shouldn't have asked this, et cetera, et cetera. Do you do that same thing? Because like all of us are kind of perfectionists who put stuff out.
Oh yeah, every day. Yeah. Every day I'm like, that's a piece of shit. But then I'm like, okay, well that's like, you could stop, like, right, and never touch that paint again, or you could keep going, right? And keep working through the really messy parts. As painters, there's like this messy part of the painting that is ugly. We hate it, but like you have to keep going in order to get to the really, really good stuff, which is so hard.
Yeah, how do you get past that?
Well, I mean, there's all these different ways, but you just kind of either just put in the time, like set however many hours you need just to power through. Sometimes I will take a break for a day, months, years, and come back to it. Like I did a series of paintings during the time I was going through a miscarriage and had to stop all of them. I was like, I can't fucking look at these paintings. Like, so I put them away. And just recently, this past year, I finished all of them. So they needed time to hang out and process and rest. And they came back and they were great. And it was really inspiring and therapeutic for me. I processed a lot. But yeah, I just think getting past the ugly, messy section, it's different for everyone. But for me, if I just power through, I eventually get to the good stuff.
So in addition to just the personal brands, I mean, you're doing a lot. You're doing a lot.
I wear many
You're doing
hats.
a lot on the Seacoast. Can you just lay out for the audience all of the different things that you do as part of your career? Right.
So I'm a multi-passionate creative person, which is a gift, but also it's for me, now that I have a 1.5-year-old, it's something that I need to really think about and be like, okay, slowly I'm just like starting to like let go and do less, which is so hard for me because I have so many things I'm so passionate about. So what I do, I'll lay it all out there for you. I create my own work. So I paint and I have shown in galleries online. I create these really beautiful workshop experiences. I collaborate with different businesses over the Seacoast to create this really nurturing, supportive, beautiful experience for anyone who wants to discover their creativity.
Anyone of any level. No
anyone of any level.
Beginner.
No. Yeah.
Okay.
My workshops are for everyone. It's been great because right off the bat with my workshops, I'm like, listen, you're going to make some shit art. You're not going to be the best right off the bat, but that's how you start and you need to start somewhere. And I think so many people who take painting classes or any type of creative workshop, they look at the instructor. Oh, yours is so good. I will never be as good as you. They automatically like put that negative noise into their head because this is a compare and contrast game when this is the first time they're picking up a paintbrush in 25, 30 years. Like, no shit, you're not going to be that great. You just have to keep showing up for yourself. So I do workshops.
How do you get someone to keep showing up for themselves and to get them past that negative voice?
I just think reminding them. I think during these workshops, I really try to connect with everyone who signs up because I can usually tell when someone's getting frustrated or in their own head and just being like, hey, how can I help you? Like, what's going on? And I think just allowing them to recognize that like this is part of the process. Like I've been here too. I'm here every day. I make a mess. I make bad art every single day, but I still keep going. And like, look at me now. Like, if you look at my work when I first started to now, it's like this ever evolving process. It's still changing and evolving, which I think is one of the coolest parts. Yeah. So I do workshops. I have a podcast. It's called Paige's Pod, where shout out Paige's Pod. I chat with other artists, creative entrepreneurs, just to kind of like have open and honest conversations about what we are all experiencing and going through as creative business owners, artists, moms, whoever. And I do live event painting, which is pretty fun. So I show up, people hire me to paint on site, their scene, and I'm a very different type of wedding painter. I don't focus on portraiture or people. I focus on like landscape, interiors, and florals.
Oh, very cool. Okay, so future live podcast event painter. Interesting. The things are rolling.
Ooh, yeah. If you have like an event for a live thing. Yeah, and like it's cool because I feel like people who decide to go into the arts or be an artist, it doesn't have to be so linear of what your career path looks like. There is an abundance of opportunity out there that is just hasn't even been tapped into. And I just am such a big advocate for like thinking outside the box when it comes to revenue streams and making a living off of something that is different than the norm and artsy fartsy and creative. And I just think, you know, I do a lot of different things, but it's allowed me to create all these different connections, and opportunities have come from these connections, which is super great and cool.
I loved it. And I'm so proud of you and all the different things that you have going on. I want to go back to you giving birth to Bodhi. So after having gone through what you went through in Seattle with the miscarriage and then giving birth to Bodhi, what were the emotions of that moment like when he was brought into the world?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really great question because I think I was very much like, people were like, oh my gosh, like, congratulations, aren't you so excited? I was like, yeah. I couldn't be like, yeah, I'm so excited because I'm just anticipating the worst, which is like, you know, pregnancy. I just feel like until he came Earthside, I was very much like aware.
I've never heard that before.
Oh, Earthside? Yeah. Until he was here, Earthside. I was like, I'm just very cautious about like what could potentially go wrong, which like is kind of a downer. But just because of my experience, I was like, listen, like I don't know. I mean, I could have a healthy pregnancy. I could not. Like we'll take it week by week because like all the different, you know, all these doctor's appointments. I was like, okay, make it to week 14. 18 and then like slowly and then until he came, it was just wild because I feel like, to be quite honest, my pregnancy wasn't a piece of cake. Like it was tough. Like pregnancy was really hard on my body, emotionally, physically. I looked great. Like I definitely had the pregnancy glow that they talk about. Great skin, great hair. I looked fabulous, but like I felt, God, like it's like kind of like a shell of a human.
How so?
Well, I don't know. It just like depleted me of all my energy and all these things that I'm so used to doing at a specific pace. Physically, emotionally could not. So like I would be like, I want to do all these things, but I can't because I'm growing a human inside of me. Right. It's like you have to like take a step back. And that is very challenging. It's very challenging. Yeah. Also, shout out to Amy. This is maybe, I'm a personal
type of person. She gets shouted out more than anyone on the show.
So at 16 weeks, maybe, I had a scare. I remember I came back from Spain. My sister was abroad in Spain. Sam and I went to go hang out with her and we came back and I was doing this mural project at a salon in Portsmouth. And I remember being like, something feels weird. Like my abdominal muscles just like contracted and felt, it was like everything was in pain. Like I was in so much pain. Like I was like, oh my God, like I'm going to have another miscarriage. Like this is like what it felt like. And so I remember Sam was on a work trip. So I literally had to call an ambulance to take my ass to the hospital. And I called Amy. It was like during a snowstorm. Amy met me at the hospital and I literally started bleeding intensely. I was like, I'm having another miscarriage. This is like too much. And so it ended up like the baby was healthy. Everything was fine. But like, again, you just don't know what could happen like during pregnancy. So I think that was like a big part in Bodhi's pregnancy where I was like, I just don't know how this is going to end. I hope it ends well. I really do. But like, you just don't know. So all these random things that pop up that no one talks about. And I'm just like, okay, pregnancy is fucking hard. Being a mom is hard. It's a beautiful, amazing privilege to be a mom, but it's also like the hardest thing I've ever done.
Yes. Well, it did end very well.
It did. Yeah.
I'm so curious to talk about as a mother of a young child is affecting your career? Because I've always thought, when I think about having children, I can't imagine putting my entire life on hold and all of the different creative pursuits that I have going on, because you know how it is. The mind never stops. You want to do everything. You want to be able to stop and do the thing whenever inspiration strikes. But when you have a child and a priority now that you place above yourself and your own needs, I imagine that's difficult. How have you been dealing with having to sacrifice your own artistic endeavors and things that you really want to do for your child?
I love that question because before, like when I found out I was pregnant with Bodhi, Sam and I remember we sat down and had this conversation where I was like, I worked so hard to like get to where I am right now, and I just can't see myself putting all of this on hold. Like I can't. And so like we worked together and started talking about ways that, you know, I didn't want our son to just be my life. Like he is my life. But what I mean is like, he needs to be part of our life. We are not consumed by this like little human 24/7 all the time. In the early days, you are obviously because they're so little and you need to keep them alive. But I was very adamant on bringing him into this world that I have created and thinking about ways to put systems in place, boundaries, time set for myself. And that, I mean, nothing was like, I feel like that took time, at least a year, to kind of really figure out how things worked with like daycare and just, you know, what I needed, what he needed. It was very much this mindset shift and change. And I just think like my business is like you fail so many times to get to where you want to be. And the same thing with having a son. Like I wanted to keep my business alive and running and keep growing this thing that I have created. And so whatever it takes, whatever I need to do to make that work, in addition to showing up for my son and my family, like that's what we ended up kind of talking about and really laying everything on the table with like childcare and just time management and, you know, ways Sam can support me and I can support him while still, you know, tending to our little one.
Well, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that too. On the subject of your healing journey, we've gone over a lot of what you've had to deal with, and I'm sure there's more that we haven't even gotten into, and not to mention your family history of depression as well. You're in therapy. I'm wondering, as we sit here today, how would you assess where your mental health is right now?
I would say it's pretty good. I'm pretty proud of myself, to be quite honest. I becoming a mom, growing a business, understanding my relationship with my dad and how we interact with each other now. I'm actually in this current stage of my life. It's tough emotionally, but at the same time, I'm like, I'm growing so much as a person. I'm becoming stronger. I'm becoming more aware of what boundaries need to be set in order for me to be healthy, successful, the best version of myself. I just think I am maturing so much as a person in a really good way. But yeah, it's really fucking hard because some days I'm like, why can't everything just be fine and normal? Why do I have to feel all these feels? But I mean, it's because I care so much. And so some days are really shitty. Some days are really great. Yeah, going into the holidays is always a little tricky because I think there's all these expectations with family and how everyone should act and be around each other. And it's just, you know, kind of taking a step back and being like, it will all be okay.
You're doing amazing, Paige.
You're doing amazing.
Oh my God, thank you. Thank you so much for joining me today, for sharing your story. Amy, of course.
Shout out Amy.
Shout out. She recommended you a while ago. And then it's been a long time in the making, but I've really enjoyed hearing your story. And we have one final question. We ask the same final question at the end of every episode every week. And I'll ask it to you, Paige.
Perfect.
Knowing what you know now, in hindsight, what would you tell your 22-year-old self about how it's all going to pan out for you?
Oh my gosh, I journal about this all the time and I have so many different answers because I just feel like the more life I experience, the answer changes. I I think my younger self was so zoned in on just being successful, or just this idea of fitting in. And success at 22 looks so different than what success means to me now. I think she would be really proud of how much I've put myself out there, because that was something that was really scary when I was younger. And just if I could give my younger self advice, just to not be afraid to fail, not be afraid to reach out to strangers and ask those questions, especially to those who are inspiring. And just to keep moving forward. Like, you're going to hit so many bumps, and really hard things in life are going to happen that are going to make you want to quit everything. But I feel like that's just where you need to, again, just keep moving forward and keep believing in yourself, because eventually something really great is going to happen.
Real last question.
Yeah.
What does success look like to you?
Ooh. Okay. So success for me right now in this current stage of my life is just to continue to nurture what I have going on with the relationships I have, with the creative spark and fire that I continue to find within myself. I feel like even like 5 years ago, I was like, I want to be global. Like, I want the world to know who I am. But for me, I'm really focused. I'm sure you can relate. I'm just focusing on like my community. And like, yeah, I want to focus on the smaller things, the more personal, subtle, quiet moments that this community has to offer, and just really just nurturing that. But also, I don't know, I'm just like, the older I get, I'm like, I want a quiet life filled here and there with a little pizzazz and sparkle, but just to like keep what I have just really strong and nurture it.
That's Paige Lindsey, an Exeter artist with nearly 18,000 followers on Instagram. Give her a follow at Paige Lindsey Design, or visit her website to learn more about upcoming workshops, to book her for your next event, to listen to Paige's pod, or to subscribe to her newsletter, which personally, I'm a huge fan of. Links to all of those are in today's show notes. I'll be bouncing all over the Seacoast this week, so if you see me at Bending Bodhi Yoga, Stoneface Brewing, or the new Studio One location in Portsmouth, please stop me and say hi. I would love to hear your story. As for next week's episode with the owner of a brand new Portsmouth business, here's a sneak peek.
That specific bag, could be a bag of dicks, was one that some of my staff was like, this is funny, but maybe we should not put it directly in the doorway because we don't want to offend anybody. I have reordered that bag 3 times. That is our best-selling bag.
That's next week on Seacoast Stories. Until then, have a great week. Live free or die.